Hello, and welcome to our Silent Designers podcast recording. Today we're live in Islington in the Business Design Centre, which is currently hosting the London podcast show, and where we are is right next to the BBC Sounds stage. So I feel we're in good company, and hopefully we're catching some of the buzz from this rather busy crowd out there. Now, in our series, we've been looking at the under-the-radar design that goes on in some organisations without really seeing it as design or having it necessarily done by designers. And this time we have a panel of experts from the Innovate UK Catapults ready to share their experience and the impact that they see designers having and potentially can have in the work they do. I'm Steve Welsh from Innovate UK Business Connect, and I'm joined today by my co-host, Katherine Wildman, founder of B2B copywriting agency, Hazel Gray.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you for the kind introduction. In today's episode of Silent Designers, we're going to be looking at multidisciplinary design, and we're joined by Senior Insights and Analytics Manager, Teresa Mikel, Connected Design Team Lead, Pete Broadbent, and Design Lead, Rob Maslin. Teresa, can I start with you, please? Can I ask you to tell us a little bit about your role at the Digital Catapult?
Of course, thank you for having me. So I work at the Digital Catapult at the economics team. So basically supporting the different teams in the monitoring and evaluation of the projects, the outcomes, and the broader potential impact that we might have as a portfolio of projects, but also individually, and supporting with the different analytics.
Wonderful, thank you. Pete, could you share with us what happens day to day at the Connected Places Catapult, please?
Thank you. It's pretty broad what we do at the Hard Catapult. So we are the UK's innovation accelerator for cities, transport and place leadership. So our portfolio is quite wide. When we talk about cities, we're doing a lot of work around future urban spaces and urbanisation. With transport, we run a test bed called the Station Innovation Zone, where we live test new products and services. And then around place leadership, we do a lot of work around how you procure innovation. So the procurement is actually quite exciting when it comes to how you procure innovation. And the design team, we're interwoven throughout everything the Catapult does.
Fantastic. Never a dull day.
No.
Never a dull day. Rob, could you explain what happens at the Satellite Applications Catapult, please?
Absolutely. So our organisation was founded in 2013, so we've been going for just over 10 years. I've been part of it for 6 years, so just over half of that. We work in 4 different technology areas, really. We work with Earth observation, so images from satellites, which covers a whole range of different types of spectrums and imagery and sensors. Satellite communications, so satellites as relays for sending and receiving information. PNT, so positioning, navigation and timing. And then the other area that we look at as well is the area that enables all of that, so in-orbit services. And those are the sort of 4 areas that we work with at the Catapult. We also work in missions, but I won't go into that today. And what's really important to designers is that all of those different technologies, they're just tools for us to be able to make impact. They're tools for us to kind of be able to solve problems for people in the real world and make sure that we put the application part into the satellite applications. So as service designers, what's really important to us is that we're goal-oriented. And that we don't just see technologies that we can sell, we see benefits that we can sell to people for people, planet and economy.
Fantastic, thank you.
Awesome. So thanks everybody, thank you for joining us. We also have with us today Harry Carr, who is Head of Design here at Business Connect, and Harry will be helping us to curate questions from our live audience in the room and for those online. Excellent, thank you. Now, we've got some questions to get started, of course. So, Teresa, if I could come to you first. With your interest in public policy and that sort of human factors, I think something we've seen vividly over the years with people setting fire to 5G phone towers or having conspiracy theories about COVID vaccines, we can't assume that the public are going to welcome new innovations or things that we bring to them. How do you think design thinking might be applied to that in a way, getting the public ready for what we've got coming?
Well, in both cases, both examples are clear cases of misinformation and lack of awareness or understanding. And in both cases as well, you see the technology side, the technical aspects are very well covered, well designed, tested, but not the consumer side. So when you go and talk to people, how do they react? How do they feel? They perceive these things. And this is where design thinking is key in the process. So you can, well, have the whole process designed and in the end go test, validate, but it's gonna be a big expanding, a big process. Instead, design thinking allows you to test early, at the early stages. So we used to call it in my old job, failing fast and cheap. So, okay, when you're starting, let's test. Instead of assuming things from the data, and I'm a data person, so I love the data, but you have to interpret the data. So instead of making assumptions, what they think, what they are saying they think, go and test, like, do you like this? Is this something that you understand? And this allows you to see what are the strengths of this innovation, but also what are the barriers for adoption. So what are the fears? What are those misconceptions that may arise? And then you can quickly iterate and pivot and get something that will be broadly accepted. So basically, it's how you just go beyond and connect to people, bring in all sorts of stakeholders. The key is always to bring the potential consumer or adopter. So how you bring all the different relevant people with different disciplines. It can be a designer, it can be an economist, it can be whoever, how you bring them all together. And again, design thinking allows you to collaborate effectively with these multidisciplinary teams just to co-create and see how you can move forward.
Fantastic. I think it's great that Pete was nodding along there avidly. Pete, from your expertise with digital design and what we know about how younger generations are creating digital content these days, how should our thinking around that be evolved, do you think?
I think it's the conversation about how we create the tools that we use is kind of, designers get a bit obsessed by their tools. I think it's really interesting to hear about the design process that Teresa, design thinking is our method. The tools that we use are what we use to kind of make it into practice, and I think what's happening with technology at the moment is it's massively democratizing the production of design. It doesn't take away the design process. You still have to have a process that you follow. So yes, you can make a very good TikTok film very, very quickly. That's super engaging. That years ago you would have needed a film editor. You would have needed a lot of skills that wouldn't have been to hand, but you can do that now quite easily. Doesn't mean it's any good. The ones that are good are probably the ones where they're still following a process. They're storytelling. They're whatever they're doing. That the tool doesn't make the content. The tool facilitates the content. AI. You can do great things with AI. You can do terrible things with AI. So with Midjourney, you can create brilliant images. Conversely, you can create terrible ones. So I think the what's happening at the moment is that we're talking about, will technology take away designers' jobs? No. It may take away it may change some of the tools that we use. This happened in the 90s when Photoshop was invented. It happened hundreds of years ago when the printing press was invented. This is not a new debate. So I think it's I think it's exciting. It's not, we need to decouple the tools from the process, which is why, I work quite closely with Teresa around how we monitor design. So, design thinking is not only for designers.
Brilliant, thank you.
And Rob, perhaps we could come to you now. The space sector. That already sounds very complicated, and perhaps difficult to engage with. How should companies be approaching you?
Well, that's a good question. We've got 200 people in our organisation. We've got people who are experts in sort of nuclear energy, from different kinds of Earth observation. We've got all sorts of different scientists and experts who do stuff I don't understand at all. It's how we work together and collaborate. It's really important. It's how we kind of create processes that are co-creative and inclusive, and team cultures that are open and willing to talk about the kind of the challenges that they have quite openly. I think we start with the impact that we want to try to create. That's the ultimate aim. So it's what's the goal? What is it we want to do? And then trying to bring everybody together and challenge or problem solve how we work towards that goal collectively. And that means that in our organisation of 200 people, we've got about 10 designers, and that means that we've got to try to facilitate, and we've got to try to create new tools and participatory processes that harness those different problem-solving skills into a coherent practice, and that's where our sort of silent designers come in. So it is, design is both a problem-solving tool for to enable the benefits to the people, planet, and economy, but it's also a facilitative tool that allows sort of translation of different ideas and disciplines.
That's interesting, yes. And a number of you, I notice, have talked about solving problems, and something or using solving problems as a route to, I guess, validating why you're doing what you're doing. Something we might touch on as the conversation goes on is if there's still room for it the other way around, by inspiring people with ideas when they know what could be done, as opposed to just saying, what's your problem, we can solve it. But I think we were going to see if we got some questions.
Yeah, Harry, can we open it to the floor, see if anybody has any questions in the room?
Yes, just as a quick note, I'd just like to say to those in the room, if you do have a question, as you're invited by the chair, please do put up your hand. I'll bring the microphone to you. But for the moment, I'd like to kick off with one that we've got here, I think for Teresa, actually. Teresa, you shared the importance of early testing and involving the relevant stakeholders early in the innovation journey, instead of making assumptions on what they like based on data. Do you have any examples you can share about this concept of failing fast and cheap?
Of course. I used to work in the beverage industry, so massive consumption. And many times we would always start from, the data, what are the trends, what do we see it selling faster or more frequently, and then go back to the product owners and the marketing team saying, what are they looking at? And we will come with a proposal. And many times, instead of failing fast and cheap, we would design a full product, their packaging, their liquid, which takes months to have a stable liquid, all the way, and then go have a test with the consumers, and they would say no, this is not what I wanted. So instead of doing that, failing fast and cheap would be, I have this idea, I don't need the liquid, I'm trying to show you a concept, I will go immediately to the potential consumer, my target audience, and say what do you think about this? What do you like? What do you dislike of this? And then go back and improve my theory. So, for example, the beer industry is very seasonal. So you have periods where you want very large, dark, heavy beers, and sometimes you just want something good, refreshing for the summer. And knowing also when to go and when to market something, not assuming, it's summer, they want a summer beer, but going is this what you want? Do you want something more citrusy? Do you want something more, bitter? It's really great. And again, the right stakeholder is important, because if I'm trying to talk to, if my target is young people, I need to go to young people and all sorts of young people. I can't go and test with older people like me if I want to sell it to college students. So it's always important to keep your audience, involve them early in the journey, and shape the innovation. And then you identify what do they like, what do I promote when I'm selling the beer, and what should I keep to myself.
So it's the opposite of build it and they will come, the other way around, the market orientation to start with. Do you have any examples, Pete and Rob?
Yeah, I think it's a really important thing to make the distinction between complex and complicated problems. So the kind of problems that designers often deal with are ones where you don't initially have the evidence. It may not be there. And to your point earlier, Steve, designers, scientists often deal with what is, where the evidence is quite sometimes apparent and available to be recorded. Designers often deal with what could be, So it's actually about making the future that we want to see rather than just trying to respond to what's in front of us all the time. And so that means that quite often the kinds of challenges that we're dealing with emerge in the process of trying to move things forward and create progress. And you can see that in all sorts of different areas of, climate change is basically anthropogenic. So it's an unintended consequence of, energy usage and cars and all of these sorts of things. So how do we, create a process that kind of takes those risks in small chunks so that we can create an idea with a basis in some kind of reality of what people are after and a kind of hypothesis of what the benefits might be, but then go and test it in really quick iterations so that we can actually, in a more robust way, see what the outcomes might be. You only need a couple of users to go and talk to, stakeholders to go and talk to kind of really start to understand what the needs are. So there's some really good work by the Nielsen-Norman group, which says that for each line of inquiry, you only need, I think it's 5 to 6 users, to go and understand 85% of the needs. So this is different from finding, basically once you've spoken to those 5 to 6 users, you get diminishing returns on investment for your research activity. So actually going out there and designing something is different from proving the benefit of that design. And how we create efficient design processes is just, it's that quick test and capture sort of process.
Brilliant. It's an extraordinary figure, isn't it? Yeah. Pete, would you add anything there?
I think the interesting thing is also we're not always designing stuff that people want. We're not always designing consumer products or consumer services. I did a lot of work designing tax. The digitalization of tax is not something people are going to go, yeah, make my tax digital, but it's really important. Those kind of services are really complicated. They're really challenging, and if you get that right, you will make someone's life better. But if you said, talk to me about digitizing tax, they'd be kind of like, we have to design services, whether they're services like going on holiday or the nice things, with the same level of effort as if we're designing the services that are mandatory. You could say, why bother? You have to do it. Doesn't have to be good, but it's understanding that you can really, unpick the problem and, make things better.
That's the real behind the scenes thing that you were talking about at the beginning, wasn't it? About people that don't you wouldn't class that as design necessarily in a trendy, creative way, but there needs to be a system design to make sure that everything works properly.
Yeah, and understanding who is the customer. So the individuals. You've got to really understand your audience, and that's key. And as Teresa was saying earlier, if you're going to do research, please talk to the right people. If you're going to do research for people who use the East Coast Main Line, don't go and talk to people who don't use trains. You have to talk to the right people, or else bad research is not cool.
Yeah, can be quite dangerous, I would imagine.
Yeah. I think there's a really important point about widening the scope of stakeholders that you research with as well. So not only is there the environment and animals, wildlife, but there's also your kind of the staff that you need to design for sometimes, who deliver the services and meet the user needs. So it's especially important when we're talking about silent designers, because as service designers, what we're often working with, the material that we work with and deliver our designs with, is people, because people do the frontline services, and their welfare, their benefits, their kind of willingness to do their job is as important as anybody, and that often transfers through to the benefit on the to the environment, to people, and to the end user. So it's really important to work with everybody.
Yeah, that's the right people. Save time, save money.
Also, they are the ones who know. They are the ones who have the real knowledge. So when I joined Digital Catapult, one of the first things I started working on was designing the monitoring process of how we operationalize this so we can scale, because it's a small team and the Catapult is growing very fast, just like you. And then instead of me coming from this is a theory, this is how we need to do it, we took a more collaborative approach and work with the teams. You are the delivery team. What do you see? These other project teams, and we start building bottom up our solution. So of course it's always evolving and it's not a fixed model, but basically our current model was built with the delivery teams. So they know how to use it, so it increases like change management, but also we make sure that we're capturing the real information they need, but also that what we need.
And that must be good for culture as well. People have been listened to. Yeah, thank you. Pete, you wanted to say?
Also, you've got to think about, if you're just designing for people, part of the challenges we've got now is because we've designed purely around people. So we, our team, we're called the human connected design team, not the human centered design team, because if the human's at the center, that can often cause problems as well as it can fix them. So if you're thinking of a silent designer, the planet is a silent designer. We need to think about our non-human actors in our design process too, because if we design purely around what people want, especially in the city context, people want warm houses. But we have to think more broadly about the impact of our selfishness on the other actors within our systems. So I think that's quite we can't just be thinking about purely about us.
Yeah, very good. And instead of thinking about us, I'm going to ask Harry again. Do we have a question from the floor?
Yes, we have a question here. If I can ask the question, introduce yourself a bit, tell us a bit about what you do, and then go to the question. That would be great.
Hi, I'm Jane Guest, and I am working on the Mindset program at the moment, which is XR for mental health, and supporting the delivery of that program. And I just wanted to ask and pick up actually on Pete. I was really interested when you mentioned AI, and in particular kind of like generative AI. Obviously there are tools out there, very famous ones, that can create personas now. And I was just wondering whether it's too early to rely on those. I'm thinking particularly a lot of our SMEs and projects are creating products and services, but they don't have the big budgets that big businesses have. So I was just wondering what your thoughts were on that. Is it good? Is it too early to rely on that? That's it really.
And it was for what? For creating personas?
Yeah, so ChatGPT can actually create personas. So when you're, either you're creating a brand for your company and you want to make sure it resonates with the target audience, or you're looking to create a persona that would be an end user, it can help you to do that. I haven't done it myself, but
yeah, I think the best way, if you want to test something with your end customers, go and talk to your end customers. The AI could be there potentially to support that, but I don't. I think it's just too early to tell how accurate that is. It's not something I've really come across. Have you seen that?
Well, the ChatGPT is basically a large language model, so there is some truth there because they are basically analyzing information, what people are saying, what they are putting out there, what they are writing. So there is something there, but again, it's important to then sense check things, because if it's gonna lie to you, there are all these hallucination things that happen because it's built to give you an answer, not to give you the right answer. So it's important to understand what's the objective of the tool as well. And it doesn't need to be, of course, with a big budget, you can go and pay for testing, but you can always have some hypothesis and then just stand on the street near the people and ask. I've done that before with my teams. Of course, it's never enjoyable. People don't want to reply, but that exercise kind of helps you see like, oh, maybe I'm completely wrong because nobody wants to talk to me. Or maybe I am up to something. So the model is trying to give you something that might not be it, but you can still check quickly and not very expensive.
Yeah, I think maybe overall, because the sample size would be huge, right? But then maybe dig down into the detail. I'm just trying to find ways of helping SMEs, to make sure that the products and the services they're developing are actually going to be adopted into the market without maybe spending a fortune on that.
But what Rob was saying, the sample size doesn't necessarily have to be big. It's being quite specific about what you want to find out, and not kind of going too broad or too wide anyway.
So I've looked to use ChatGPT before, and to inform sort of research which was done on a shoestring. And I didn't have time to kind of look through all of the different pieces of technology that I needed to kind of understand. So I got a list, or requested a list from ChatGPT, and I asked for sources as well. And it gave me a list of sources and a list of links. But when I looked at the links, they had nothing to do with the thing that the content that they created, and some of them didn't function at all. So the traceability and the transparency is not to the level that I would expect from a designer in our team. You know, it's not the kind of level of credibility of user research that you would get. And I would say you're probably better off talking to 5 people than talking to ChatGPT.
But you can use a lot of AI tools to help with your analysis. So if you're doing research, so we use, I use Miro. So Miro boards, where you might create a board with 100 Post-it notes. The AI in Miro is very good, where you can say, please tell me what the themes are. And it doesn't tell you the answer, but it helps you to sort of pinpoint. So, if I've got 100 Post-it notes and I've got to read them all and find what the themes are, it will do it in a second. I see that as an additive thing, but I wouldn't just say these are the only 5 themes. I would still do my own due diligence, but I think having those sort of tools to maybe speed things up, are quite good.
It's interesting. It's what you said at the start, Rob, which is technology is a tool.
Yeah.
So it's how do we use these new and emerging technologies to speed up certain aspects of the design process, but you're still going to need that human idea at the very start.
Yeah.
And to monitor and to check, as you say.
They're just to empower designers, or to empower the people that are using them, but they are tools. And it depends on how the user directs those tools, what they use them for, and how they, really the craft of those tools as well. How do we actually craft things with them? And one of the things that I often see, in design or industry is that we kind of pick out these patterns of usage and design processes, and we refine them to a certain point, but they've got errors in them. Every model has an error. No model is perfect, but a lot of them are useful, right? So, but when we kind of keep repeating them and repeating the use of them, and we repeat the errors that are in them and the biases that are in them. And what I think eventually happens is that the people who get ahead of the market are the people who rethink those tools, reinterpret them so that they can take advantage of the gaps that are being left and causing unmet needs, basically. So, yeah.
I think I might be probably saying heresy now, but I still think there's a gap in the intelligent bit of AI. I think we've certainly seen people rush to embrace the term, I think, a bit sooner than computer scientists of former eras would have accepted where we're at. Samsung are selling an AI washing machine. I have my doubts. I've also seen quite a lot of people describing it as, at the moment, the large language models being really like a giant plagiarism machine. And that's the art. And so I'm sort of drawn to your word craft, because there's a craft of what you could use with the tools. And I'm not being a Luddite. They will improve and they will get better. But there is a craft in, even then, perhaps again, it's about educating people how to use them, how to know where the holes are in them, that they're actually not very good at this. You're really only getting back a version of what you put in, and this is how to rely on it. This is where not to. So there is a craft there to learn. But I think the worry I have about this democratizing of design or other related and other creative things is that it also, if you like, lifts the noise floor. So it feels that there's something that as designers we need to do to make sure our signal sticks out more, because there is a real craft in what's being done here that is maybe sometimes harder to see. And it's hard to know how to express that without trying to sound elitist, which is not what I mean. The new tools are good. It's good that they're empowering things. And as you said, Pete, these changes have happened before. But how should we be, as designers, responding to this to make sure that the craft isn't lost?
I think it's how we're responding and how other people are responding too, and what they, when people say, because people don't understand what design is. They think design is we make things pretty, or we make beautiful objects. Design is much more nuanced than just the aesthetics. But when you see, the rhetoric of AI can paint a picture, or AI can make music, or AI, yes, it can, but AI will make better music if it's being controlled by a musician than it would if it's being controlled by someone who doesn't understand the theory. And I think we're probably going through a bit of a peak at the moment where this is so new. I've got a post-it note on my wall at home that says research ChatGPT, which I probably put up there less than a year ago. It's just it's just washed past me and almost washed over me because it's happened so quickly, which I think has probably blindsided a lot of designers a bit, and caused a bit of panic maybe. But
a bit of ruction. Yeah, that was a great question. Thank you so much. Harry, do we have anything else from the floor, please?
Yes, we do. We've got another question from in the room. Again, if I can ask you to introduce yourself and a bit about what you do.
Okay, thanks, Harry. Hello, I'm Edward Hobson, Design Counsel. We're the National Strategic Advisor for Design. Really interesting conversation so far. Our mission is Design for Planet. And a couple of you have already mentioned this in terms of your responses. So I'm really interested in how we move design as a practice into that space and move away from an idea which sustainability is a sort of a parallel. And it's a couple of particular drivers around carbon or energy or resources. And actually, there are a series of design challenges here around how do you take into consideration the pretty significant shifts within markets that are going to be driving businesses' own success and productivity and performance, and how do you actually shift the needle in a more endemic way to think about those issues rather than it just being a sort of sustainability thing that gets tagged on at the end. So really interested in your thoughts and practice in that space.
Who wants to go first?
I can go. I'm very into system thinking. System thinking tries to capture that broader impact and not having things in silos, but how they connect, and these connections and the interdependencies, those really hide all of what you're saying exactly. So instead of saying sustainability is something extra that you add, it should be embedded and it should be considered from the beginning. And instead of rushing into solutions and rushing into doing something, you should take time to question the question. So what am I doing and why am I doing this? And let's understand the ecosystem where I'm working in, what are those interdependencies, and then, okay, what are those layers? Because of course you can always include too many things and then you can manage that. But how you narrow and ensure that you have the layer that you need to have and you have the environment as a layer, but not as something extra that you need to put in, but as something that will have an effect because it will.
Baked in from the beginning.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that sort of systemic approach of looking at the sort of the cause and effect of things, and it's making sure that when we're designing, the same as if you're an SME, design is not a nice to have. The same as if you're a designer, considering the non-human actors is no longer just what about the planet? It kind of, we need to be thinking, if we're doing a service blueprint for a service, there are the non-human elements of that need to be considered, not just as at the end, let's think about the planet, or let's think about, haven't considered sustainability. We need to sort of be a bit more system-wide in our thinking around how, if you do this, this will happen. And if you do this, something else will happen. And I think it's those models we're not, we need to be considering everything when we're doing our design. And we've been doing some work together recently around how can we use systems thinking to think about, how do you monitor and evaluate design? And you monitor and evaluate design across many different levers, which have many different cause and effects of each other. And just trying to get our head around that is quite interesting, and getting monitoring and evaluation as being part of the design process. So we're actually trying to work out, we're designing something, how are we going to know it's successful, or how do we know it's working or it's hitting those goals? So I think that's kind of why the sort of multidisciplinary nature of what we're doing is quite quite exciting, I think.
It's a big question, isn't it? I think it starts with a purpose, and I think for a lot of designers, that's part of their purpose, and so they bring it into the design brief because it's part of what they do and how they work. It often comes back to the economic question, obviously. So how do we make sure that it sits? How do we make sure that we value nature, and that value sits alongside GDP as an important point of measurement? I think there's a lot of good economists out there working on this. So Kate Raworth, Mariana Mazzucato, and other people who have come up with similar sort of economic models. But what we can do as designers, it is again making sure that we have that in our values, and that we build it into every project that we do, and that we understand the systemic nature and systemic effects of all of the things that we work with. Service design is very systemic in its nature. It's just often dealing with human systems. I think service designers have therefore got naturally a lot of skills to build these things in and understand the intended and unintended consequences of the work that we do. It's just, I think for me, it's about instilling those values in people and finding mechanisms to do that.
I'm tempted to bring out the systems engineering word so popular here, which is about holistic thinking. And I can tell you from my background in systems engineering that it's hard to get people to apply it there too. And I've talked elsewhere how I see a big overlap in some of the ideas in systems thinking and systems engineering with design. It's much more richly connected. But I think there's also a human element that I wondered if you had thoughts on how often it is where there are things that are in our own way about where cost occurs versus where the cost is saved. So it's perhaps a slightly facile example, but in my town, they've recently been replacing the streetlights with fresh mercury vapor streetlights. And you think, why would you be doing this when there's nothing about LED streetlights which is not better? They're certainly cheaper to run, more controllable, less wasted light, way longer between maintenance, but they cost a bit more. Not a lot, but they cost a bit more. And that's a different budget from the people who pay for the maintenance and a different budget who pay for the electricity. So the people who install them have got no motive to use something better because they're saving money from somebody else's budget. How can we break through that kind of thinking? Because where we can see things are interconnected and yet existing systems need pulling apart.
It's a difficult question to answer, isn't it?
That's huge.
I accidentally asked slightly too big, but
I've
Good.
often asked this question of big energy companies. So if you look at some of the smaller, environmentally friendly, sort of renewable energy companies, they're often cheaper. They've often got better customer experience, but they're often smaller, or at least they were, however many years ago. And it baffles me that there are still the big kind of fossil fuel companies who are selling energy and doing quite well out of it, and often doing it worse and more expensively. So, and I think that a part of this is design's role, is to kind of make sure that we're able to do this better, because there is a lot of kind of research out there to talk about that the use of design breaks down a lot of the barriers to adoption. Good design does anyway, in the way that we create, co-create, and sort of build advocacy into our work. There's a really interesting example from Tesla. The marketing budget of Tesla is nothing. The amount of money that they pay their designers is above the market rate, and the reason that they do that is because of the the sort of viral nature of some of their work, and the way that they're actually able to build in and meet the user needs, and all of the kind of benefits that good design brings with it. It's sort of anecdotal. I don't have the source for that. I probably should if I've said it, but it's a good example of actually good design can really break down those barriers. And I think over a period of time, we'll start to make that change, start to see that change in ensuring that there are sort of better usages of different energy sources that are in renewable companies and decarbonising the grid and all of these sorts of things.
So what I'm really, I guess, secretly hoping is that there's a role where we can work together on that widening holistic view in terms of influencing policymakers. And I guess certainly at the Connected Places Catapult, this is would be big for you because of your very wide connections there. But it feels like, look at me getting excited about regulation. Maybe regulation and changes of policy is how to do that, and there's something that we could do to help people break out of that thinking.
Yeah, absolutely.
You can take a citizen-centric view of policy making. You can use design thinking, you can use the double diamond to create policy, and there are examples of that happening across government where that is happening. So this is where it comes back to the design is not about the tools, design is about the process. That process can be used for lots of different things other than designing a product. It can be used for designing a policy or or another form of intervention.
Yeah.
Fascinating. Thank you very much. Great question. Harry, can I come back to you?
Absolutely. We've got a question from one of our online listeners, Tom Marshall, who works with colleges and businesses around design. He wants to know, he has a question for the panelists. Tom asks, what methodologies do you use to continually interrogate the design skills and approaches that are coming forward? And he wants to link it to ensuring that those coming out of design education are future ready, future fit, and the design agencies they work with are thinking around the same thing as well.
Fantastic. I think Pete, having
the methods and the
methodologies that you might use to interrogate the way that you're doing design and make sure that it's up to date, that it's cutting edge, that you're engaging with the latest thinking around design. What methodologies do you use to make sure that you're doing that with your own practice?
I think if anyone who's been through a design education will understand. If I say the word crit, it will kind of make you judder, because we go through a process as designers and design education where we critique and we challenge each other. It's peer review. Designers, and it can be quite bruising. It certainly was when I was a student. But I think those old techniques of challenging each other's design and challenging each other's thinking as designers is where the richness happens. Because if it's done kindly, not as in thrown on the floor and walked over, but it's kind of we need to be able to challenge each other and challenge each other's thinking. And I think that's and those old methods, they're not new, And I think what I try and keep in our practice is trying to keep those kind of methods, live, and also some of the old methods like sketching and drawing and whiteboards, all those, those sort of, just using, co-creating, physically is quite rich. I don't know if that really covers it.
Yeah. I have a framework that I use, so not so much a set of methods, because I think it's more important to have skills and methods and tools. Skills are kind of longer lasting, and they'll kind of get you through, and they'll help you create more tools. And so the framework that I use is to first of all understand what is the purpose of what we're doing, what is the aim of it, and then breaking that down into achievable objectives. So what are these objectives that we can achieve that can help move us towards this purpose? And then once we've achieved those objectives, or once we've identified the objectives, what are the materials we use or could use to affect that situation? Now, this is where it kind of gets a little bit it's a bit difficult to explain what they are in service design, but within product design, when I was a product designer, we would talk about wood, metal, plastic, so on. All of them had certain properties that would help us make things that would serve the purpose. In service design, we're talking about organization, we're talking about data, we're talking about people. They're still materials, they're still helping us solve those problems that benefit people at the end. And they all have some properties to them as well, ways in which you can shape them in order to scale and realize your change. And so trying to understand all of those different things, identify them and understand the unique properties in them is really important. But then how do you craft them? So how do you craft those materials and actually bring about that change so that you achieve the objectives that move towards the purpose? And it's, at the end of the day, it's that purpose that I judge good design by, or effective design, shall I say.
Fraser, would you add anything there?
Well, I'm not in the design team, so yeah. But I can say, as you collaborate with others, you can always assess yourself if you feel you're getting behind, or you're using too old methods, or learn other methods that might be older but new to you, because there is not one way of doing it today and tomorrow or yesterday. So as you collaborate with others, we are working together in projects, and there are other cross-Catapult projects that always also help you understand what are you doing well, what you can learn, and natural turnover as well. Always bring new ideas to the team.
We've mentioned co-collaboration a couple of times this afternoon, and I think you're obviously working together already. Is it something that you each bring your skill sets and then you can enhance and refine as you go? What's the power of that co-collaboration, do you think?
Yeah, it's everyone coming from their expertise and bringing their point of view, their ideas, but also listening to each other. For example, recently I joined the Design Away Day, even though I'm in the economics team. They were very kind to invite me. And the discussions where you can definitely tell everyone comes from their background, from their experience. But as we discussed, we realized we're not disaligned. We just bring different points of view to the same thing. So it's a classic example of the elephant, and depends on where you're seeing it. Can be anything, a wall, a brush. So it's important to have that and to allow everyone to bring their own expertise, but also be humble enough to listen to others and recognize I don't have the answers. Maybe they have them, and we can all agree together.
Nice. And you were mentioning multidisciplinary teams as well, Rob.
Absolutely.
Similar power behind those?
Yeah. Obviously we met a couple of weeks ago as well at the Catapult, Cross Catapult Design Day. And we work in multidisciplinary teams in the Catapult, as I imagine you guys do as well. And it's always, you can't solve a problem from just one perspective. You need all of those different points of view and those different expertises to come together. So, yeah, collaboration is incredibly important. But I think one of the keys to it is making sure that you've got the right culture. Because, as the saying goes, culture is strategy for breakfast, right? So, it's making sure that you have a culture where people are willing to speak out, where they're willing to talk about and challenge each other. And it's, there's complete correlation between the effective teams' willingness to openly talk about their problems versus teams who want to perhaps look good and have a veneer of status and concern about status, and maybe not willing to talk about their challenges, and those teams don't perform as well. So it's, whether you're disciplinary, interdisciplinary, whatever it is, making sure that you're able to talk about your challenges and you're creating that environment to have collaboration sort of thrive.
I think having the time and space to do it as well, though, isn't it? Because it's the sessions we've had where we're having brainstorms where we've got designers, economists, system engineers in the room. We're as a Venn diagram, if you overlaid it, we're much more aligned than we're not. But the cultures are different, the language is different. We've been kind of educated differently. There are differences, but I think we often obsess on the differences, but we don't think so much about But the sessions we've had have been so much richer because we're looking at it from those different perspectives. You could say it's taking a long time, the whole, diverging and converging. Designers love to diverge, and they'll probably diverge forever. Having an economist there is quite helpful sometimes because we need to know we've got enough ideas now. Let's come back in, and that sort of diverging and converging model is, and that's not unique to designers. Engineers do that, economists do that, and I think you get the culture right and you get the conditions right. We've had some, really rich conversations which we wouldn't have had in either of our silos.
Yeah. Steve, would you add to that? You're a big co-creator, collaborator.
I do.
And an engineer.
Engineer, yeah.
Or as I like to say, half engineer, half scientist, half musician, but I'm not very good at maths, certainly with fractions. The joy that comes from having a diverse group of people working is real, and I totally believe the value of that. But the thing, in my experience, that we always have to work on, though, is that it's great to talk about cognitive diversity, but you do need some patience sometimes, because you get the richest results. It's not because you want friction, but when you're with people with very different life experiences and angles, this is where the most interesting things happen. But you also sometimes need to learn yourself about how to pace yourself with that and accept those differences, because there can be friction. But it's absolutely the right way forward. But I see it almost as an art that needs learning in itself, how to be that open-minded. But great example about the diverging forever, but then maybe actually you do need somebody in the room who's going to say, now it's time to bring it to fold into some ideas.
Blend into Rita. I think we possibly have time for one more question. Hopefully that answered our viewers' question in full.
Thank you very much. Yes, we've got one more question from in the room.
Hi, everyone. My name is Alexandra Jugurano. I'm from Innovate UK Business Connect. My question to the panelists is, as designers or silent designers, are you more of a generalist or a specialist? Do you pride yourselves with the depth of your knowledge or the breadth of your knowledge and expertise? Thank you.
I'm going to go first on
I'll
that one.
let you start.
Rob.
You're eager.
I would say I probably am a generalist. I mean, I've worked in a range of different teams with people who have different specialisms. In many organizations, you will find the researchers separated from the designers. I've worked as a researcher, as a specialist researcher before. I've also worked as, now working as designer and researcher. And I know a little bit on data ethics. I know I've worked a long time in sustainability. So I would say I'm very much T-shaped in the kind of sort of typical sense of, so I've got quite a broad knowledge across a lot of different areas. And then I've got quite a deep knowledge in, I guess, the intersection of design and research. And I quite like the working across the two of them, because it means that when I go out and do my research, I don't lose information in translation. I understand and have lived the kind of conversations, and I understand all of the emotions and the feelings that come across I've experienced doing that. So, but other people might feel differently.
Nice, thank you. Teresa, can I come to you?
Sure. I would say it's a bit of a mix. Of course, I'm not an expert in any ways on anything, but I do try to have enough foundation so I can speak about something confidently and knowing the foundations at least, or the methods. But also I think it's important to have that breadth. If you're too focused on one thing, you lose the picture. So because of that, I would say I might be a bit more of a generalist, but understanding that I have strong education around certain topics, and that's what I'm going to bring. I'm not going to come into a team and saying, like, I'm a designer. I'm not. I don't know the techniques. I've used some of the tools, but it's not my background. I haven't worked on it at all. But again, that combination, I think it's important, but also understanding that there's always someone who knows more and someone who knows less as well. I don't know if I answer. I'm sorry, but
nice way of putting things. Pete?
I think in a team you need a mixture of both, really. So you do need to have the generalists, but then you do need to know when you need to bring in the sharp focus of a subject matter expert. I would say I'm a generalist. My background, very similar to Rob's, is in sort of user experience and digital. So the intersection of design and research for me is really, really key. I had a massive segue for where I ended up working in management consulting for quite a long time. And the similarities there, we were talking about this earlier, are very similar. Business change, transformation. There's a lot of elements in there which, if you take a user-centered approach, it's very similar to design. A lot of designers don't thrive in that environment, but they are very, they're very similar. And I think spending time there and surviving, it's made me a very, very much a generalist, jack of all trades.
Do you find it something that as a project emerges that you have to adapt and sort of draw on skill sets that maybe you haven't used for years, and then you realize maybe from university or projects that you've done early in your career, and that's built up and all of a sudden it's useful again and you can make those connections? Is it something where it sort of is quite a movable feast almost?
I mean, absolutely. Last year, I joined this consultancy work. We were supporting an innovation hub, and I was brought in to help with the monitoring and evaluation, so how could they embed? But at some point, we were struggling getting a concrete mission and vision, and I brought back my older hat, supporting brands with their positioning, and bringing those techniques that we were using when we were doing like brand value workshops. Who are you, your target, your objectives, your benefits, all of that. We took those techniques, and in the end, I took over that session, and we got something more concrete because they were too abstract at the moment. So I think you always bring something from your previous experience, and that's what makes a better professional. You're not just one thing. You might have a role today, but you have a broad experience, either professionally or personal, that you can always bring to the table.
Nice.
One of the joys of being a designer and working at the Catapult especially is that every project you learn something new. So, I mean, we're always trying to work out how to change things and change the future and change the way that things are. Pretty much every project I've done, very few of them, I mean, I'm able to transfer something from one project into another project, learnings, but I'm so often actually dealing with different subject matter. I learn on every single one. And working with such different people as well, you do pick up very generalist skills, and working specifically within catapults, which are often at the bleeding edge of innovation, with so many different diverse brains and ideas, you do start to kind of bring on board all of those different sort of points of view as you kind of go through and start to understand how to collaborate with people and work your way through problems on a project. So.
I think with a catapult, you have to have deep knowledge and generalists, because if you just had generalists, you wouldn't thrive. You've got to know when you don't know the answer and you can go and find it. And I think having that breadth and depth is really key.
Yeah, that network that you can build. I'm so sorry to draw everything to a close. We're coming to the end of our time today. Thank you so much for sharing your insights, knowledge and expertise. Thank you to the people in the room for your questions, people online for your questions too. It's been a fascinating afternoon.
Yeah, and thank you from me too. And also a final thank you from all of us, I guess, to the production team. Thank you. I know it's been a lot of work putting this on today. And to our sponsor, Innovate UK. If you'd like to find out more about what we've been talking about today, or more about what we've got going on, or other ways of connecting, please hunt us down on the Business Connect website. We'd love to hear from you. And thank you, and see you again on another podcast.
Thanks for joining.